Your purpose as a coach, as a leader of young people, is to add as much value to them and make them as good a people and get the most potential out of them as possible.
Jamy, thank you for joining us on the Generation Youth Podcast. I so appreciate you being my guest today, but also I really want to thank you again for being a part of the Igniting the Next Generation Summit that we had this past summer. If you're listening to it in the future, it was summer of 2023, and you probably missed out if you don't know about it. So, but thank you for being a part of our show. I really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Appreciate what you're doing with this podcast, with where your heart's at, what your mission is, and that conference, the summit. I was really happy to be a part of that. You had a lot of great speakers, a lot of great messages. So thanks a lot.
Well, we had great success with it, and I think it brought great value for people who really want to see young people thrive and reach their potential, to really empower them. And that was our goal, and there will be future ones of those. So, well, Jamy, our audience, they get tired of hearing from me every week, and they really would love for our guests to share a little bit about themselves. So if you wouldn't mind, share a few minutes about yourself to the Generation Youth group.
Yeah, well, it sounds like we should swap audiences, because I think my audience gets tired of me as well. So maybe we should swap those audiences out. But, Jamy Bechler is my name. And if you're watching this, you can see that my first name is spelled a little bit differently than Jamy. And my last name is not spelled the way it's pronounced. So I'm always getting my name butchered a little bit, but Jamy Bechler. But my dad and my mom, they knew they wanted to name me Jamy, but they never talked about the spelling. And when I, popped out, when I was born at the hospital, the nurse asked my dad, and he was like, well, Jamy. And she goes, well, how would you spell that? He goes, I don't know. I guess Amy with a J. So I became Amy with a J. But yeah, it's
my name by my parents. I mean, I'm James, but they called me Jamy up until I got into grade school, and it was Jamey. So it's a little bit different. And my brother-in-law, my wife's husband, is Jamie Jamie. So,
yeah, which is more of a common way to spell it. But yeah, both of my names get butchered a little bit, but that's all right. But for those that don't know me, which is a lot of people, I was a college basketball coach for about 20 years. I coached both men and women. I coached mainly in the South, but a lot of different places, small colleges. I won, Coach of the Year honors. We had really good teams. I also got fired. I also coached really bad teams, or more to the point, I was a bad coach on different teams. So I was up and down at different points in my career. Then I went to be a high school athletic director at a school in Indiana that had the 5th largest gym in the world, seated over 7,500 people in their gym. Nobody had won more boys basketball titles than that school that I went to in Indiana. And so for a basketball junkie, that was exciting for me to go there. But we did a lot of leadership stuff. We did a lot of, turning around their budget, putting systems and processes in place, which are boring to me, but were needed in order to do some of the leadership stuff that we wanted, and to coach the coaches and lead leaders and develop the kids as much as possible. And then about 5-6 years ago, I decided to leave organized athletics and started Bechler Leadership, and went out on my own, and we do podcasts. We write some books. We speak to people at conferences, speak to teams, sports teams. We're mainly in the education athletics field, but been self-employed or unemployed, I guess, depending on the day, for about the last 5 or 6 years.
It wasn't Hickory High School, was it? You didn't have.
It was Marion High School, the Marion Giants.
Let's see if anyone in the audience gets the reference that I just made. Please post it in the comments, either on your audio platform or on YouTube, if you understand what I meant when I said, was it EAD at Hickory High School? So,
well, in fact, ironically, in a couple days, I am going to Hickory, the real life Hickory High School.
Oh, really?
And I'm speaking, doing a basketball clinic at the gym, the really small gym that they used in the movie Hoosiers. Oh, I just ruined, I ruined your, your quiz for everybody. But, yeah, the Hoosier basketball, the Hoosier gym, the movie Hoosiers, we're going to go do, a little clinic there. And so I'm going to speak about some leadership, and then I'm also going to do some rebounding stuff for the coaches in attendance.
Well, Jamie, I loved what your message was in the summit. And it really spoke to me on a personal level because the experiences I had working with young people and what brought me into the world of youth coaching. I was sharing with you beforehand that I had coached adult teams when I got out of college, in baseball and men's softball and competitive softball, not the really weird leagues, but I mean competitive. And for those who understand knows what I'm talking about. But I ventured into coaching youth because of a problem that I saw with coaches of being so angry towards it. My son was 7 years old and playing on a baseball team. Had a great coach his early years. I mean, just enthusiastic, good teacher of the game, understand. And then he moved to this next team, which was at a better league, a higher level. And they're out there in the outfield, and this coach was yelling at these 7 years old who were making errors. Imagine that, 7-year-olds making errors, that they were pathetic. Oh, you guys are pathetic out here. And I was like, what is he expecting of them? And it moved me into it because I felt there was a better way. And you really, if I had to use one word for your message, it was encouragement. How to encourage folks on this. So speak to why that was the passionate message that you wanted to share with us.
Yeah, we see a lot of that with coaches, and there's a lot of, I would say old school coaching that still can be successful, where you degrade people or you're just, cracking the whip on people, but that's not the norm, like for a successful. And when I say successful, to me, success is maximizing your potential, being the best that you're capable of being. And so that could be you win one game if your potential was 0 games, or just accomplishing goals that you never thought you could accomplish. And so I don't think that that's the way across the board to get people to be the best that they're capable of being. That old school mentality doesn't work anymore. And if it works, it's absolutely the exception, the aberration. But we look at those coaches, and I won't name some of those coaches, but we'll look at those coaches that do it that way, and we'll say, yeah, it can still work, except those are the exceptions. We also read about the hundreds and hundreds of coaches that tried to do it the old school way, and they get fired or they get in trouble because it doesn't work. People, and it really doesn't matter if you're talking your 7-year-old son or you're talking us in our 40s or 50s, it doesn't matter. We don't respond long-term to being berated, to being degraded, belittled, beat down. We might respond in the very, very short term, but not the long term. And so if we want sustained success, if we want to get the most out of people for the long term, then we're going to have to find a different way. And I do think you need to be encouraging. I think you need to catch people being good. Now, that automatically people will associate that, I'm not saying, hey, James, let's you and I and all of your audience just join hands and sing Kumbaya. It's not pom-pom positivity where we're just saying, we're number one. We're not going to be beat, when, we're down 20 with a minute to go. We've all seen cheerleaders that do that. It's like, no, we're not going to win right now. We're not talking the positivity that's fake. We're not talking encouragement that's fake. We're talking about how can we add value to people, lift them up? How can I encourage you, James, to be the best that you're capable of? And maybe you're not the best player on the team, but that doesn't mean you still can't do something good. You still can't do something right. There's something that you can add, something that you can contribute. If you're on my basketball team and you absolutely can't shoot 3-pointers, I'm not going to encourage you, hey, when you're open, take the shot all day long. No, there's a reason you're open. The other team knows you can't shoot. Let's find a different way for you to contribute as opposed to checking up, shots when you're open. Maybe not a great analogy, but that would be fake positivity or fake encouragement where I'm telling you to do something that you're not equipped to handle. You're not enriched. You're not able to do those things. And so I think we need to encourage people, find ways to get the best out of people. And as coaches, we don't do that. And most of my philosophies now have come out of failure. They've come out of, I didn't do it right, especially as a young coach. I was 27 years old. I was the youngest women's basketball coach in in NCAA level, 27 years old, I was constantly trying to prove I belonged. There's a reason they hired me so young. Hey, trust me. Hey, do what I tell you to do. They wouldn't have hired me if they didn't think I knew what I was doing. So I was constantly trying to prove to people, just do what I tell you to do. And that's not how that's not how you get the best out of people. That's not how a husband and wife get the best out of each other. That's not how a parents and kids. That's not how employers and employees. That's not how coaches and athletes. That's not how you should work together to get the best out of everybody.
Using coaching as an analogy for how we work with youth overall, and you talked about how sometimes old school coaching does work. Immediately when you said that, I got to thinking that those who try to mimic what they would consider that are not really seeing it deeply, because it's not as one dimensional as a coach that is negative and hard on somebody. And I can't help but to think now that since we've already brought this subject up, but I can't help but to think about Norman Dale from the movie Hoosiers. He was very old school and harsh, but you saw the scenes where he was, with his kids, a father to his kids, encouraging to his athletes, and going forward as well. So for those who are seeing, that coach, the Krzyzewskis of the world are out there, they're yelling and screaming at their players, don't see the other side.
Well, if we're going to go with the fictitious coach of Norman Dale in Hoosiers, he was a very flawed coach. Mm-hmm. Obviously the result was good. Obviously he cared about his players, but he was fighting some demons himself. And some of that stuff, does that work? I mean, the truth be known, and I hate to go with talent sometimes, but if Jimmy Chitwood's not a star player, and if Jimmy Chitwood doesn't stand up for him, then he's out of a job.
Fired. That's right.
And I'm not sure that he doesn't deserve to be fired at that point, but there's so many dynamics at play when we're working with people, especially youth. And we can't just push one button and expect it to work. We can't just say, hey, this worked for Nick Saban, for Coach K, for Norman Dale and Hoosiers, so I'm going to do this thing, because there might be 129 different things that were also done. And, the same way, I remember as a coach, I did one strategy one year with a team and it worked perfectly. The next year, I thought everything was set up and I tried the same strategy and it totally backfired on me, because I didn't take into play, all the factors. I just went on the surface and was like, okay, this is a good time to pull this strategy out. And it backfired on me because I didn't consider all those other things. And so you might see a Nick Saban doing something. You might not realize what Nick Saban has done behind the scenes.
That's right.
Also, you might see so-and-so coach do something. Maybe so-and-so coach isn't doing anything behind the scenes, but he just has all the 5-star athletes. It pays off this year. He tries it next year and he's fired, or his team totally turns against him, or X, Y, and Z. And so I think at the end of the day, you're not going to go wrong if your purpose as a coach, as a leader of young people, is to add as much value to them and make them as good people and get the most potential out of them as possible. If you're in it for your resume, for accolades, for you to look good, then I think you're going to struggle long-term. And that's what I was as a coach. I cared about my athletes, but ultimately I wanted a promotion, a raise, a better job. If we won, I thought I looked good. If we lost, well, they made me look bad as a coach. And even with leadership, hey, let's do community service. Yes, it helps the community, but man, people are going to say that Coach Bechler, he runs a great program. They're doing this community service because, Coach Bechler has a great culture there. No, we're doing community service because it made me look good, because I knew people would say, oh, they have a great program, and if it benefited the community, that's secondary. And, that's the honest to goodness motive of not just me, but a lot of coaches out there. We do things hoping that it has a secondary effect, but the main effect is we want us to look good. And it's not about us as a coach, as a leader. It's not about us. It's about the people that we're interacting with, engaging with, leading.
Well, I'm a coach. I'm out coaching, and I really want to change my mindset to be more encouraging. I try my best, but I'm still driven by these things. what's step one for me? What do I do to get myself turned around and head in that direction? Because I have worked with not only coaches and teachers and youth leaders, but even parents who are guilty of this. All I seem to do is criticize my son. All I seem to do is find the fault in my daughter. How do I turn this around? How do I, find the good to build upon?
Yeah, it's one of those things that's simple but not easy. It's simple for me to sit here and say it, but
Mm-hmm.
even after I realized, what I needed to do, and it took me getting fired. So I was 27 years old, youngest NCAA head coach. Well, 4 years later, they allowed me to take my talents elsewhere. I got resigned. They did not want me anymore. And I talked to a coaching mentor of mine the day I got fired, and I was mad. I really wanted to know, what do I need to do to set myself up for the next job? What do I need? Do I need to sue someone? What kind of lawsuit? What kind of legal or administrative, strategies do I need to be thinking about right now? And he said, the number one thing you need to be thinking about is right now, this moment, do you want to be better or do you want to be bitter? And I know that that's a cliche, but I had to make that choice right then. Did I want to be a better person, a better coach because of this, or did I want to let bitterness take over? And he said, your decision right now about that doesn't automatically change the results, but what it does is it changes your path that you're going down. And so you're now going to go down a path of improvement, of growth, of development, of trying to be better. This thing is going to make you better if you want it to. And I was like, that makes sense. Let's do it. So that was a simple thought process. It was not easy. It took me many years to get to the point where I was always looking at ways to make players better. And I
Mm-hmm.
never perfected that. I remember the very last game I coached as a college coach. We're in the playoffs. We're doing great. We had a great season. And one of the last minutes of the game, in my last game as a coach, I make a stupid decision as a coach that was a terrible leadership decision. And I knew better, but I still got in the heat of the moment. I made a bad emotional decision, a bad leadership decision. So even if you make those decisions, even if you're trying to do everything right, we're still human, we're still flawed, but you've got to make that choice at some point that, you know what, I'm going to take a little bit different path than maybe other coaches do. And so it's a path of looking at everything from a development and improvement and a growth standpoint. So when James messes up, instead of, and this takes practice, just like any skill takes practice. When James messes up, I don't look at it as he messed up. I need to look at it as, okay, how can I take him from where he's at right now to where he needs to be? And that might be a lot. It might be something he's always screwing up on, or it might just be a mistake. Was that something that's a habit, or was that something that's a mistake? What can I do to correct that? So let's, I won't go too deep in the weeds on basketball, but let's say, James, you can't dribble with your left hand. Well, if you make a turnover, you boot the ball out of bounds because I had a play where you were dribbling with your left hand, going in a certain direction. Well, shame on me, maybe, for putting you in that position where you did screw up, where you were more likely to have to dribble with your left hand. And I know that's kind of a simplistic thought process, but we all the time either put people in positions where we're essentially setting them up to fail, or we're not providing them the tools. And think
Mm-hmm.
about it from our perspective. Flip the script a little bit. How many times have we worked for a boss and we're a little bitter about the boss because they don't give us the tools, they don't give us the resources, they don't equip us, they don't give us the onboarding or the training that we need to do our job, they don't tell us what we need to know. And so we don't know what we don't know. We don't ask questions because we don't even know. We get mad at our boss about that, but we do the same thing with youth. We don't equip them. We don't help them see things. We don't put them in positions to be successful or to utilize their skills. And so the first thing is you've got to be aware of that. You've got to choose the right path. You got to say, hey, I want to be a better coach so that my athletes get better, so that students get better, not so I'm better. When I improve, our athletes improve. And that's the most important. But once I make that decision, then I have to constantly be looking for ways to add value, catching them being good. I'm going to find good things to say to James to encourage him, but I'm also going to find when James messes up, I'm not going to be there with the hammer, to tell him he's wrong and just be the first one to correct him. I'm going to be there to figure out, hey, how can we go somewhere together? How can we improve together? Maybe I didn't set you up for success. Maybe you haven't been doing what you're supposed to, but maybe I need to figure out a little bit more about what makes you tick. I need to maybe connect with you a little bit more. Maybe I need to encourage you so you're actually listening. Maybe, how many times as a parent, as a leader, as a coach, do we say, hey, I've told you this a million times? Well, yeah, but if they don't like us or if they're ticked at us, we could tell them 2 million times and they're not going to
Yeah.
listen because they've shut us out. And so the more that we can connect with the people that we're interacting with, the more they're going to listen. And maybe we don't have to tell them a million times, or maybe they're connected. We're connected with them, but maybe we just have to change our communication style to match theirs. 40-year-old, 50-year-old Jamy is different than a teenager. And even Jamy as a teenager was different than the teenagers I might be coaching now. And so maybe we have to communicate a little bit differently. And so we have to kind of seek to understand them and understand maybe what inspires them.
I love the fact that all this kind of also builds upon the three core things that we feel like, we need to work with youth. And the biggest one being their self-image, is that if you're constantly finding the fault, it's going to build upon them that they're going to find the fault first in themselves. Where if we're finding the positive, if we're finding something to build upon, they in turn are going to try to look, they're just going to mimic what they see us doing. They're going to in turn find, hey, I can build upon this. And when you were thinking of that, I was thinking when I was coaching and coaching high school baseball, great kid, freshman, probably the best athlete as a freshman, so much so he was on the varsity team and he's really good. And I was coaching first and he got picked off twice. And the second time, it just freaking ticked me off so much that I was walking back to the dugout. I said, we need to take him out and put such and such in, and such was a bad player. And so it was just my anger doing it. And I got rebuked real quickly by the head coach. But now I'm thinking back to, what was that anger doing to that young man? What was that? Well, how was Samuel feeling as he was hearing Coach McLamb say, jerk him off and put, I don't even remember the other kid's name, that never played, that was just there literally because we had an extra uniform, and he was on the team. So,
well, a lot of times we coach like we're coaching, Mike Trout or Bryson Harper, or we coach like we're coaching Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant. We coach like the things that we say are going to be receptive or picked up upon because we're coaching an all-world talent. Mm-hmm. The majority, I don't know, 99.9% of the kids we coach are not the kids that are able to just turn it on and off successfully. So just telling them they screwed up or yelling at them, that really doesn't motivate long-term. And it really doesn't motivate for the good, most kids, or even just telling them something one time, they don't pick up on that. They've got, 7-second attention spans, their attention span is terrible. They're not paying attention as much as we would like. They're not thinking about things like we would like. And so I think coaching, we sometimes think, well, all we need to do is know the X's and O's, know some strategies and tactics, and then we just tell them and they're going to get it. That's not most of the kids we're dealing with. They're going to learn, not necessarily what we teach. They're going to learn what makes sense to them. When we communicate something to them, communication involves two people, or it involves more than just one person. It involves more than just a talker. It involves, I have a message to say to my athlete. Well, when I say that thing to that athlete, if they don't interpret it the way that I intended it to be interpreted, then it's not good communication. So it can be clear to me all day long, but if it's not clear to my athlete, then we've got a problem. It's not what I teach, it's what they learn. It's not what I say, it's what they hear. It's not what I coach, it's what they learn. All that kind of stuff, we need to be looking at it from their perspective sometimes. So take your pickoff example. With that kid at first base, there could be a number of different things you could do. And I'm not even going to say like, this is the one thing that if you had done this, it would have been better. But, tone of voice, when you talk to them, What did you do after the first time he got picked off? What did you do when he got on base the second time? What did you do after the first pitch? What did you do after the second pitch? Did you talk to them about the delivery of that pitcher? Little tells that pitcher might have had. There's so many different things that, what are you doing in practice? Was it a habit?
Hmm.
Was this something that you could have seen coming? And not just the pickoff thing, but there's so many things that go into a teenager, and so we've got to constantly keep our head on a swivel about how can I best, you know, find out what makes them tick, to inspire them, to get them to pay attention right now, and then next time to get them to pay attention right now, and then next time get them to pay attention right now. It's a battle sometimes, but it's not a battle like me versus them. It's just a battle within myself as a coach, as a leader, to find the best way to inspire those people that I interact with, the best way to motivate them or to encourage them, to make them feel like, hey, I want to do this thing. And almost every kid that we deal with has some strengths, has some positive,
Hmm.
has some things that they can do to contribute to whatever you're involved in.
I really hope too that those who are listening to our podcast and joining us in this conversation see this as not just a technique to help improve that performance for that particular activity, whether it's a sports or some other leadership activity or even at home, but this is a foundational principle that can have implications for them lifelong. Because we really are dealing with a mind, a brain that is still forming their identity, that they are getting inputs from all different places to try to figure out who they are, and we're providing some of those endpoints, and we don't want to convey to them, you're a failure, you're a loser because you got picked off twice at first base, by this pitcher. It's We
Well,
need to.
they know, James. They're I mean, they know that they got picked off.
Yeah,
They know that that's
yeah,
a
and if
quote
they don't,
unquote
their
failure.
teammates are going to tell them. So
Yeah, I mean, so and as coaches, it's like sometimes I think, and I've been guilty of this so many times, like, am I dumb? I must be the dumbest person in the stadium or in the gym because I was Captain Obvious. I just yelled at the kid for making the turnover. Well, yeah, everybody knows they made a turnover. The kid knows that. How did I help? All I did was state the obvious. Anyone could
Mhm.
do that. Why do they even need to hire me? Anyone could do that. A robot could do that. It's obvious. But what separates the leaders and the coaches, the good ones, is they can take something that's obvious and find maybe the not so obvious, and they can find a way to move forward. And but you said something too that got me thinking, or I think it bears repeating, and or bears a reminder, is that we are teaching X's and O's, we're teaching strategies, we're teaching skills, but we're really doing it as a way to teach life skills. And I know, once
Right.
again, that's kind of kumbaya, and that's kind of higher level in a way. But at the end of the day, almost all of us, when we deal with these youth, when we deal with these teenagers, what we're doing is we're helping our community be better 10, 15, 20 years from now. Our community in the future will be better or worse based upon the youth that we're dealing with now. And I know that goes a little bit deep, but sometimes that's a good reminder that, what, teaching this skill isn't as important as how this kid is going to feel about learning this skill, how this kid is
Right.
going to feel about how I make them feel. And I'm not saying, we've got to 100% care about everybody's feelings, and we're walking on eggshells all the time, because just because, when you deal with team aspects, you're going to have to, there are going to be some hurt feelings sometimes. So you're not always going to 100% be able to handle the feelings. But what you want to be able to do is look in the mirror and say, you know what? I did everything that I could to help James reach his potential as a person. I found value where maybe no one else found value, or I caught him being good, or I reminded
Hmm.
him of what he could be, what he was capable of being. Um, and so how you do anything is how you do everything. And so if you're somebody that is, as a coach, you're looking for growth and development in general, then you know what? It's when I'm working with you on hitting, if I'm working with you on fielding, you know what? I'm not just separating it into hitting and fielding. I'm trying to make you feel good as a person. I'm trying to make you into a better teammate so that you can be a better employee one day, or a better business person. I'm trying to help you be a better leader on the team so that one day you can be a better leader in your family or a better
That's
leader in
right.
your community. And so, how you handle adversity, how you handle that error at second base, or how you handle getting picked off at first base. Yeah, that's a baseball thing, but it's a life thing. And sometimes we forget about that and we just focus on the baseball thing. And when we focus on the life thing, our perspective starts to change a little bit as coaches and leaders. And, I say this and people can hear this. And I don't say this like I was perfect at this. I can give you a lot of players I coached that would say Coach Bechler is full of BS, because he yelled at me one time, or he was always on me about something. And you know what? That kid is probably right, because I wasn't perfect as a coach. I learned I was a better coach at the end of my career than I was at the start, but I was still making mistakes at the end. Just like as a father, just like as a husband, I'm still making mistakes. But I try to learn from those things, and I try to have that perspective of growth and development. But, every day it's a battle. You got to fight. If you're trying to have a better culture in your team, you got to fight for that culture every day. You can't get complacent. And if you're trying to be a better coach every day, you got to fight to be a better coach and not just be complacent.
I love the concept of us conveying to our audience that it's not about this activity, but it is a bigger thing, that is these life skills that we're working. Because immediately when you were sharing those things, what was coming to mind was back to that 7-year-old team. Wonder how many. I don't know any of those kids. I don't know where they went. We didn't play in that league much more than that, and I don't think we ever encountered any of those in the leagues that we played in and on the travel teams that we played in. But I wonder how many of those 14 boys or 12, 14 boys that were on there that were 7 years old then, how many of them continued with a passion for the game?
Yeah. And too many coaches, I hear it all the time, or I see it in social media. I scroll through Twitter, or I'll post something, and invariably some parent or some kid or some adult will be disgruntled about, back when they were 12 years old, they had this terrible coach. And so all coaches are bad. I
Hmm.
lost my love of the game, or whatever. And you know what? I hate that they had that experience. And I wish that all coaches were perfect. We're not perfect, but too many coaches make it about themselves, and too many coaches, you know, it, they're not looking for ways to build up kids. And I think that that's so important. Not that you have to cater to kids, not that you have to help them be more entitled, or, give them participation trophies all the time. I'm not saying prop kids up when they don't deserve it. I'm saying find ways to find them deserving of stuff. Find ways to find their skills, their talents. Find ways that they can contribute. Uh, Make it more than just about your X's and O's and your
Hmm.
playbook. And I definitely didn't do that even at the college level. They have egos. I work with pro athletes and pro coaches, and they have egos too. It's just their bank accounts are bigger and they run high, faster and jump higher, but they still are people and they have feelings. And you have to find with every person, how can you connect with them? How can you communicate on a level that they understand? Do you even know what's important to them? Do you know what their hopes and dreams and fears are? And a lot of times we don't, because we're just worried about our plays, our X's and O's, our strategy. We're not worried about, what James wants. And so
Mm.
that comes back to bite us. And then when I'm trying to get, James to do something, James doesn't do it because James doesn't like me.
That's
Well,
right.
and as a coach, I'm like, well, I'm not here to be liked. This isn't a popularity contest. Well, it is if you say kids these days. Well, kids these days, they don't run through a wall. Kids these days, they have commitment issues. No, kids don't have commitment issues if they believe in you. And if you believe in them, they're going to run through walls for you, and they're going to go out and do things that they never thought possible. But it's a lot of times the selfish coaches that complain kids these days. And I was there. I said kids these days a lot of times.
Well, I think you just hit on point. It's not kids these days. This is an eternal problem that we've seen when adults who are working with kids, or coaches that are working with youth, are just, if they're not looking for the value, trying to bring out the value that they turn against them. When a few years ago and the world shut down, and my daughter, who was a 10 at the time, decided to, I mean, not decided, but was forced to be home for a time, we would still get up in the morning and watch television together. And I was in control of the TV, so we were going to watch old sitcoms. I mean, like old sitcoms, like 70 years ago sitcoms. And what I noticed is that those storylines were exactly the same kind of issues and problems that youth were having today. And I distinctly remember seeing Leave It to Beaver episodes and Andy Griffith episodes that had coaches and people working with youth that were negative to them and watching the boys not do well. And then the dad or Andy would come in and be positive, and the boys would turn out to do great stuff. And I mean, it's not something new. Now it manifests itself in a different way. Now we all would agree to that, but it's these kind of dynamics of working with youth, they're always there. It's just human nature.
It's hard, and it takes work. It's a lot easier if James isn't performing to yell at him and sub him, put a substitution in there, or to change the starting lineup, or to maybe put a different.
My high school coaches.
Yeah. That's a lot easier to do. The hard thing is, hey, is it my fault? Or more importantly, is it my responsibility that James isn't getting the job done? Was I maybe not clear? And a lot of times, as leaders, and we see this, all you have to do is turn on the TV or go to websites, and you see our political leaders or our business leaders. Oh, it's not my fault. It's not my fault. It's not my fault. I don't care whose fault it is. I care that you're responsible because of your position of finding a solution, of making things better. Or if you can't find a solution in the short term, making sure that maybe this doesn't happen again. As a coach, it's not my fault, so-and-so that James got picked off at first base. It's not my fault. No, but it is my responsibility to help James so that next time he doesn't get picked off, or I minimize the chance of that happening. Or it's my responsibility to put him in a position where he doesn't get picked off, or to prepare him better. It is my responsibility as a leader. It might not be my fault, but 100% my responsibility. And we pass the blame. We play the blame game so much as coaches. And it's like, who's the adult here? You are the 15-year-old. You're blaming a 15-year-old why do you think a teenager is going to do what's right? I still don't do what's right. And you expect a teenager to do what's right under pressure situations. No, it might not be your fault, but it is your responsibility. Step up, man up, cowboy up, and be responsible as a leader. Being a coach isn't just wearing a whistle and getting to call the plays and being in charge, even though that's what some people think. It's not about being in charge. It's about making people and situations better. And I kind of get fired up about this. And part of it is because I'm mad at myself because I wasted a number of years doing it wrong. I consult with coaches all the time, and I bang my head against the wall all the time because coaches are not coachable. They want their players to be coachable, but they're not coachable. Or coaches, sometimes it's like their number one goal is to just get James to do. James, why won't you do what I tell you to do? Our goal is to have compliant followers. No, that's not how to have a great program, a great culture. The best programs have a whole bunch of leaders. They have a whole bunch of people that take ownership in that whole culture. It's not just coaches' program. It's our program. It's we, us, ours. And oftentimes we don't go down that road. It's just do what I tell you to do. I know what I'm doing. Just do what I tell you to do. Well, compliant followership in the short term might work, but long term, you're not going to have a sustained, successful culture.
And the audience, if you're listening to us and you're going, this podcast, I've stayed with it for so long, and you guys are already talking about coach. It doesn't apply to me. I'm not a coach. You're not seeing how coaching is really a great classroom, a microcosm of world. I mean, it's like everything is intensified there in such a way that the lessons that you can learn from it to be a better parent, to be a better youth leader, to be a better youth minister, to be a better teacher, just to be a better leader in general, you can derive from this because it's so much more intensified and especially, the positive stuff. While you and I are recording this, is my favorite one of my favorite sports events of the year, especially one of my favorite baseball sports of the year. That's the Little League World Series. And I wonder sometimes if the coaches are so positive and upbeat towards that because they're mic'd, or if I think there's some of that. I think that we don't, to deny that would be wrong. But
Right.
most of the very successful ones, they're there supporting those young boys, those 12 and 13-year-old kids that are out there on a stage with enormous pressure to perform at a level that really an average kid probably shouldn't have to be put under that microscope like this. But those boys are, I mean, they're getting that input, that positive input from them. And I just love that. And I think lessons can be derived from those types of observations in any aspect of working with youth.
Yeah, I love the saying, how you do anything is how you do everything. Now obviously there's rarely a time where any cliche, any quote, any saying is 100% always right. But I do think on the whole, how you do anything is how you do everything, because we're people that are made up of habits.
Mm-hmm.
We're better or worse today based upon our choices and decisions we've made in our past. We make it harder on ourselves. Some of us, it's easier because we've made better decisions, leading up to this decision today or whatever we face. But our habits, how we handle what we see on social media.
Mm-hmm.
I can almost guarantee you that if you're negative or you're a troll on social media, or you're talking bad about people, or you're finding the worst in people that you disagree with, you're probably, if you're coaching teenagers, you're probably going to struggle with when they fall short of what your expectations for them are. You're probably not going to be as compassionate, or you're not going to cut them slack, or more importantly than even being compassionate or cutting them slack, you're not going to be looking to how to add value to them, how to help them grow and develop, because your habits are being negative. Your habits are just criticism and blame, as opposed to finding solutions. You know, obviously there's always exceptions to everything, but man, I see too many coaches, and I watch them on social media, and they say negative stuff on social media. I'm like, yeah, you're probably saying that behind the scenes with your coach or with your athletes. And how is that going to help them grow and develop? How you handle a kid or work with a kid that's struggling in the classroom is probably going to be indicative of what you do when they're struggling with basketball or baseball. Or
Mm-hmm.
if you think that, well, James doesn't matter to me because he's not important enough, or this person can't help me because they're a janitor. I want to go shake hands with this multimillionaire over here. If that's your attitude away from the basketball court, well, then you're probably not going to care as much about the 14th or 15th player on your team as you are the starter. Those things are very aligned. Your attitude about one thing is probably going to carry over. And so I would encourage people, and I still have to remind myself about this all the time. See the good in people. How can I make people in situations better, or help make them better? And it starts with myself. Am I becoming better? Am I coachable? And a lot of times I gotta check myself because I'm not being coachable, or I'm being a little stubborn about something.
I love our conversation today, Jamy. How can our audience get in touch with you, connect with you either through your website or social media, so that they can learn more about what you have to offer and learn from you?
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah. I'm on a lot of the social media platforms, as most people are. Twitter is my number one thing, or I guess it's called X now. But if you're a twit or you're an X, Coach Bechler at coachbechler.com. We try to put out a lot of positive insights for both athletes and leaders and coaches. You're not going to see who I voted for president or election. You're not going to see what food I'm eating. You're not going to know who my favorite team is, or even where I'm going to speak. It's not a timeline full of, this is an advertisement for where I'm going to speak. We try to add value as much as possible. But jamybechler.com or coachbechler.com, either one gets you there. To all of our stuff that we got going on, blogs, podcasts, different things like that. So we just try to add value where we can, and hopefully one or two people will pick up on something, or people will pick up on one or two things, insights that can maybe help them. That's what we're trying to do.
And audience, if you want to connect with Jamy, just look in the show notes. They'll have all the links to his social media channels and to his website, and anything else that we have available and stuff will link. So if you're listening, go to your platform, your podcast platform. You'll see it there. If you're watching this on YouTube or listening on YouTube, as some people do, just look in the show notes down below us, and you'll see that information there. Jamy, thank you again for your contribution to the summit. You really enriched the entire. It was such a great. I know my audience is getting a little bit tired because I'm in the middle of like a post-summit. Everybody that I've had over the last few weeks and will continue to have over the next few weeks have been summit people. So they're probably a little bit tired of that, but it was such an impactful event for me, and I appreciate that. And thank you for your time today. It really has been a joy for us to share together.
Appreciate you having me. Keep up the good work.
Well, thank you. And audience, thank you for sticking with. Hey, if you've listened to us this long, watched this long, you obviously found value. So please comment, share, and like on this podcast. Someone you know needs to hear this message. So send it to them today. And we'll see you again next week on the Generation Youth Podcast.